She was a ghost in scrubs, a whisper in the sterile corridors of the border clinic. They saw a rookie nurse, too quiet, too intense. Her boss, the celebrated Dr. Evans, saw a punching bag. But when the doors splintered and the guns came out, they would see what she truly was. Now let me take you inside the day the world turned upside down at the Clínica de la Frontera. The air in the clinic was a tired cocktail of bleach, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. It clung to the back of the throat, a permanent resident in the low-slung building baking under the relentless Texas sun. Nurse Clara Reeves knew the smell intimately. She breathed it in, processed it, and filed it away with the 1,000 other sensory inputs she collected every second of every day. It was a habit she could not break, a feature of her internal operating system. She moved with an economy of motion that her colleagues mistook for timidity. Her steps were silent on the worn linoleum, her hands steady as she checked a patient's blood pressure. Her voice, when she used it, was low and calm, a placid surface on a very deep lake. The other nurses, most of them older and worn down by the clinic's chronic underfunding and overwhelming caseload, saw her as a curiosity. A 28-year-old with the eyes of a 40-year-old, a woman who never joined their break room gossip, who ate her lunch alone, and whose locker contained nothing more personal than a spare set of gray scrubs and a worn paperback. To Dr. Mark Evans, chief of surgery and the self-proclaimed king of this dusty little kingdom, she was an inconvenience, a blank slate on which he could scribble his frustrations. "Reeves!" His voice boomed down the hallway, sharp and imperious. It sliced through the low hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft murmurs of waiting patients. Clara didn't flinch. She finished securing the cuff on a young man with a fever, gave his arm a reassuring pat, and turned. Her shoulders tensed for a fraction of a second, an internal switch being flipped, and then relaxed into a posture of professional deference. She walked toward the source of the summons, her expression unreadable. Dr. Evans stood in the doorway of Trauma Bay 1, a Jove-like figure in an immaculate white coat. He was a man who cultivated an aura of importance the way a gardener tends prize-winning roses. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed. His jaw was perpetually set in a look of grave seriousness, and he wore cologne that was far too expensive for a place like this. It fought a losing battle with the clinic's signature scent. "Yes, doctor?" Clara's voice was neutral. He gestured impatiently at the chart in his hand. "This intake report, it's a mess. Did you do this?" Clara looked at the chart. It was for the patient she had just triaged, a migrant worker with a badly infected leg wound. She had filled it out herself, meticulously. "I did, sir. Is there a specific section you have a question about?" Evans scoffed, a theatrical sound meant for the benefit of the two junior residents standing behind him, their faces a mixture of fear and admiration. "A question? I have a question about your basic competence. Patient reports significant pain and discoloration. What is this, a creative writing class? I need numbers, nurse. Pain on a scale of 1 to 10. I need precise descriptions. Is it erythema? Is it necrosis? Use your vocabulary." "The patient only speaks mom, doctor," Clara replied, her voice still level. "He doesn't have a concept of a 1 to 10 pain scale. I noted the exact shade of the discoloration in the detailed section and took a photograph, which is attached to the digital file." He described the pain as like fire ants inside the skin. I thought that was a significant and useful descriptor. Evans's smile was a thin, cruel line. It was a smile that did not reach his eyes, which were cold and flat as polished river stones. He thought, you thought, "This is a medical facility, Nurse Reeves, not a group therapy session. We deal in facts, in data. Your job is to translate the patient's primitive descriptions into usable medical information. If you can't handle that, perhaps stacking shelves at the local grocery store would be more your speed." They deal in SKUs. Nice, simple numbers. You could probably handle that. The residents snickered. A wave of heat washed over Clara's neck, a familiar sting of humiliation. She felt the eyes of other staff members on her, the quick glances away, the shared discomfort. They had all been on the receiving end of Evans's tirades. He was a bully in a white coat, a man who used his authority as a weapon. His surgical skills were undeniable, which bought him a great deal of latitude. But his humanity had been surgically removed long ago. "I will be more precise in the future, doctor," she said. The words tasted like ash. "See that you are," he snapped, thrusting the chart back at her. "Now get out of my sight. I have actual work to do." Clara took the chart. Her fingers brushed his, and she noted the slight tremor in his hand, the clammy texture of his skin. He was a man running on caffeine and ego, a balloon stretched to its breaking point. She turned without another word and walked away, the sound of his condescending laughter following her down the hall. She retreated to the quiet of the supply closet, her designated sanctuary. She leaned her forehead against the cool metal of a shelf, the scent of sterile gauze and iodine, a welcome antidote to Evans's cloying cologne. She took a deep breath, held it, and let it out slowly. Breathe in, control. Breathe out, release. It was a mantra from another life, a lifetime ago. A life where incompetence was not met with mockery, but with death. A life where precision was not a preference, but a prerequisite for survival. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, the image of a windswept desert under a canopy of alien stars flickered behind her eyelids, the taste of grit in her teeth, the weight of gear on her back. She pushed it down. That life was over. She had chosen this one, this quiet, anonymous life of service. She had wanted the quiet. She had craved the simplicity of healing, the straightforward binary of sickness and health. She had thought it would be a refuge. But the world was full of men like Evans, men who mistook quiet for weakness, stillness for stupidity. She had traded one battlefield for another, and the weapons were just different. Here, they were words, humiliation, power dynamics, a cage of her own paranoia. A soft knock on the closet door startled her. "Clara?" It was Maria, the head receptionist, a kind, grandmotherly woman with worry lines etched deep around her eyes. Clara opened the door a crack. "Yes?" "Don't you pay him no mind, honey," Maria whispered, her voice laced with sympathy. He's got a burr under his saddle today, more than usual." "It's fine, Maria. I'm fine." "No, it's not fine, but you handle it better than anyone, like water off a duck's back." Maria patted her arm. "You're a good nurse, Clara. We all see it. Don't let him make you think otherwise." Clara offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Maria." The sentiment was kind, but it was wrong. It wasn't water off a duck's back. It was 1,000 tiny paper cuts on her soul. Each one was a reminder of why she had left the other life behind. The politics, the egos, the commanders who cared more for their careers than for the people under them. Dr. Evans was just a low-stakes version of the same poison. She spent the next few hours in a state of hyper-focused activity. She changed dressings, administered medications, and updated charts with a level of detail that bordered on obsessive. Every entry was a silent act of defiance. She would be so good, so precise, so unimpeachably competent that he would have no ammunition left. She would become a human shield made of silence and authority. The afternoon waned, the harsh sunlight softening into a syrupy gold that slanted through the dusty clinic windows. The flow of patients slowed to a trickle. A deceptive calm settled over the building. It was the quietest part of the day, the lull before the evening rush of farm workers and families coming in after their shifts. Clara was in the small, windowless staff room, methodically cleaning the coffee machine. It was a task no one else wanted, and she found a strange peace in the methodical work. The smell of old coffee grounds, the feel of the warm water on her hands. It was simple. It was real. That's when she heard it. It wasn't a loud sound. It was a sound that didn't belong. A heavy, rumbling engine moving too fast, followed by the screech of tires on the gravel of the parking lot. Not the familiar rattle of a beat-up pickup truck or the wheeze of an old sedan. This was a sound of power, a sound of intent. She froze, her hand still inside the coffee carafe, her head tilted, her body instantly, unconsciously oriented toward the noise. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Her heart rate, which had been a placid 60 beats per minute, kicked up to 90. The clinic staff barely registered it. Maria was on the phone, her back to the entrance. 2 nurses were laughing at the main desk. Dr. Evans was, presumably, in his office, signing paperwork and admiring his reflection. Then came the second sound, the solid, authoritative slam of multiple heavy vehicle doors, the crunch of boots on gravel. Not 2 or 3 sets of boots. More. Half a dozen at least. Moving in unison, moving with purpose. Clara pulled her hand from the carafe and wiped it on her scrubs, her movements suddenly sharp and economical. She moved out of the break room, keeping to the edge of the hallway, using the corner for cover. Her senses were on fire. The clinic, which moments before had been a mundane workplace, had transformed into a tactical space. Entry points. 2 at the front, the main double doors and a smaller staff entrance. 1 at the back, a delivery door. Windows all along the front, large and unprotected. Cover. The main reception desk was solid oak. The pillars in the waiting room were concrete. The interior walls were flimsy drywall. She saw the shadows fall across the glass of the main doors. Large, man-shaped shadows. Then the world exploded in noise and violence. The glass on the main doors didn't just break. It granulated, bursting inward with a deafening crash as the butt of a rifle smashed through it. A booted foot kicked the rest of the door open, and the first man stepped through. He was dressed in black tactical gear, a ballistic vest, a helmet, and a mask that covered the lower half of his face. He held a short-barreled rifle, holding it in a low, ready position, his movements fluid and professional. Another man followed, then another, fanning out with practiced, terrifying efficiency. Al suelo! Todos al suelo! Ahora! The shout was guttural, commanding. Get on the ground! Everyone on the ground! Now! Panic erupted. A collective scream tore through the clinic's quiet atmosphere. Patients scrambled from their chairs, tripping over each other. Maria shrieked and dropped the phone, diving behind her desk. The 2 nurses at the station froze like deer in headlights, their laughter choked off in their throats. Clara did not scream. She did not freeze. She moved. She didn't think. Her body, the vessel she had tried to retrain for quiet service, reverted to its factory settings. In the space of a heartbeat, she processed the scene. 3 hostiles visible, all armed with automatic weapons, moving with military precision. This was not a random robbery. This was an operation. They were looking for something, or someone. Her eyes darted around. Not him either. She was scanning the patients, the staff, looking for the target. The lead gunman pointed his rifle at the ceiling and fired a short, controlled burst. The sound was concussive in the enclosed space. Plaster dust rained down. The screaming stopped, replaced by terrified whimpers. Silencio! The leader barked. He gestured with his rifle toward the reception desk. You! Where is he? Maria, trembling behind the desk, just shook her head, unable to speak. Clara was already in motion, melting back from the hallway corner. She moved not like a nurse, but like a predator. Her soft-soled shoes made no sound. She slipped into the nearest empty examination room and closed the door, leaving it open just a crack. Her heart was a cold, steady drum. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Fear was a chemical reaction, and she had learned long ago how to control her own chemistry. What she felt was a cold, clarifying anger. They had breached her sanctuary. They had brought the old life into the new one. From the sliver of a view through the door, she saw a fourth and fifth man enter. One stayed at the door, providing overwatch. The other began moving down the hallway, checking rooms. He was systematic. He was coming her way. She scanned the exam room: stainless steel tray, a stool on wheels, a sharps container, an IV pole, potential weapons, all of them poor. The footsteps grew closer, heavy, confident thuds. She backed away from the door, pressing herself into the corner behind it. She regulated her breathing, slowing it down until it was almost silent. She was a statue, carved from adrenaline and ice. The door swung open. The gunman stepped in, his rifle sweeping the room. He was focused on the empty examination bed, the space under it. He didn't check behind the door. It was a rookie mistake, a fatal one. In the instant his back was to her, Clara exploded from the corner. She moved with a speed that was utterly alien to the persona of Nurse Reeves. One hand shot out and clamped over his mouth and nose, cutting off his air and his ability to shout. Her other arm snaked around his throat, her bicep pressing against his carotid artery, her forearm against the other side. She locked her hands together and squeezed, driving her body weight into the choke. It was a perfectly executed blood choke. The man struggled for a second, his body tensing in surprise and sudden panic. He tried to bring his rifle around, but she had him off balance, his spine arched backward. His fingers scrabbled at her arm. His muffled grunts were pathetic. 6 seconds. His movements became frantic. 8 seconds. His struggles weakened. 10 seconds. He went limp, a dead weight in her arms. She didn't let go. She held the choke for another 5 seconds to be sure, then gently lowered his unconscious body to the floor, taking his rifle as she did. She laid him on his side in the recovery position. She was a healer, even now. You don't kill unless you have to. She checked the rifle, a SIG MCX. Good weapon. She checked the magazine. Full. She flicked the safety off and on again, the familiar click a grim comfort. The weight of the weapon in her hands felt more natural than a stethoscope ever had. She pulled the mask from the unconscious man's face. He was young, Hispanic, with a small teardrop tattoo under his left eye. A professional, but not military. Mercenary. Cartel, maybe? The leader was shouting again in the main room. I will ask one more time. We are looking for a man. He was brought in this morning. An accident at a construction site. Where is he? Clara's mind raced. Construction accident. She had triaged him. John Doe, late 30s, multiple fractures, a severe concussion. He had been quiet, stoic, his eyes scanning everything, just like her. He had a faint scar tracing his jawline, one she had recognized. A specific kind of scar from a specific kind of shrapnel. He wasn't a construction worker. He was one of them. One of her kind. And in that moment, she knew. They were here for him. And she was the only thing standing in their way. She peeked back out into the hall. The gunman who had been checking rooms was overdue. The leader was getting agitated. He gestured to another of his men. Rico, find out what's taking Diego. Rico started down the hall, his rifle held high. Clara slipped back into the room, leaving the door exactly as it had been. She moved to the other side of the room this time, crouching behind the examination bed. Rico was more cautious. He paused outside the door, listening. Then he called out, his voice a low growl. Diego, ¿estás ahí? Silence. He pushed the door open, this time staying in the hallway, using the door frame as cover as he peered inside. He saw his partner on the floor. His shoulders tensed. He started to raise his rifle, to call out a warning. He never got the chance. Clara was already up and moving, a gray blur of motion. She kicked the wheeled stool with all her force. It shot across the linoleum floor and slammed into Rico's shins. He yelped in pain and surprise, his balance compromised for a critical half-second. It was all she needed. She lunged forward, not with the rifle, but with her hands. She grabbed the barrel of his weapon and twisted, using his own forward momentum against him, wrenching it from his grasp. In the same fluid motion, she slammed the butt of his own rifle into his temple. He crumpled to the ground without a sound, his eyes rolling back in his head. 2 down, 3 to go. The calculus of the situation had changed. She now had 2 rifles and a sidearm she stripped from the second man. But she also had a clinic full of hostages and a team of trained killers who now knew something was very, very wrong. She heard the leader shouting, "What is happening? Form up! Form up!" Clara dragged the second man into the room and closed the door, locking it this time. She needed a moment. She needed a plan. Her eyes fell on the unconscious man on the floor, the one she'd choked out. Diego. His radio was clipped to his vest, an earpiece still in his ear. She knelt, pulled the earpiece out, and fitted it into her own. "Diego, report! Rico, report! Status!" The voice in her ear was the leader's, tight with anger and suspicion. Clara remained silent, listening. Information was ammunition. "They are not responding," another voice said over the radio. "Something is wrong in that hallway." "We have a ghost," the leader hissed. "Forget the rooms. Find the patient. He will be in a trauma bay or post-op. He has a broken leg and ribs. He cannot have gone far. Find him. Now." Trauma bay 2. That's where he was, in the back of the clinic. And that's where Dr. Evans's office was. A new, terrible thought bloomed in Clara's mind. Construction worker, brought in this morning. Evans had been furious all day, his temper shorter than ever. He had railed against the paperwork for the John Doe, complaining about the lack of insurance, the cost of the x-rays. What if it wasn't about the money? What if it was about the attention? She had to get to the patient. She had to get to Trauma Bay 2. She looked at the flimsy drywall. No good. The ceiling tiles? Maybe. She gave one a push. It lifted easily. Above was a dark, dusty crawlspace filled with wiring and ventilation ducts. It wasn't ideal, but it was a pathway. She slung one rifle over her back and kept the other in her hands. She climbed onto the counter, then onto the top of the supply cabinets. With a grunt of effort, she pushed herself up into the crawlspace, pulling the ceiling tile back into place behind her. The darkness was absolute. The air was thick with dust and insulation fibers. She moved by feel, her hands finding the wooden beams, her body crawling silently over them. She was a ghost now, in truth, moving through the clinic's hidden veins. The radio in her ear crackled with the mercs' frantic chatter. They were sweeping the main room again, getting rougher with the hostages. She heard a muffled cry. Maria. A cold, professional fury settled over her. This was no longer just about survival. It was about justice. She crawled faster, the rifle bumping against her back. She navigated by memory, picturing the clinic's layout in her mind, above the main hallway, past the reception, toward the back. She paused when she was roughly over Trauma Bay 2. She carefully, silently, lifted a ceiling tile just enough to peer through. Below her was the patient, the construction worker. He was awake, his eyes wide, listening to the commotion outside. His leg was in a temporary cast, propped up on a pillow. He was helpless. And in the corner of the room, huddled behind a crash cart, was Dr. Evans. He wasn't trying to help the patient. He was trying to hide, his face pale with sweat, his expensive suit jacket wrinkled. He was on his phone, frantically typing a text message. The leader of the Mercs, a man they called El Martillo, the Hammer, was getting impatient. He's not in the main room. He must be in the back. Breach the door to the surgical wing. Clara knew she had seconds. She looked at the patient. His eyes flickered up, as if he could sense her presence. They locked for a moment. In his gaze, she didn't see fear. She saw recognition. He knew what she was. She had to make a choice. If you were Clara, in that crawl space, with armed men about to breach the room below, would you drop down and try to fight them all head-on? Or would you look for another way to give your hidden ally a fighting chance? Clara chose the second option. A direct confrontation was suicide. She needed a force multiplier. She looked at the patient again, then made a series of quick, precise hand signals in the dim light filtering through the crack. It was a stripped-down, high-speed version of battlefield sign language. Hostiles, 3, at hallway door. Objective, you. Acknowledge? The man's eyes widened slightly. He gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. Ally inbound? She signed. He shook his head grimly. Then he tapped his temple. Concussion. Can't fight. He then tapped his leg. Immobile. So he was alone, and she was his only hope. An underground railroad of one. The sound of a heavy boot kicking the door to the hallway echoed through the clinic. Time was up. Clara lowered herself back down, dropping silently onto a stack of supply boxes in the adjacent storage room. She moved to the door that connected the storage room to Trauma Bay 2. It was locked from the bay side. "Get out of my way!" she heard one of the mercs shout, followed by the sound of a body hitting the floor. One of the nurses, probably. She didn't have a key. She didn't need one. She lined up her foot with the lock mechanism and delivered a perfectly placed side kick. The wood around the lock splintered and the door flew open. She entered the room just as the 3 remaining mercs burst in from the hallway. The scene froze for a cinematic second. The 3 gunmen fanned out. Dr. Evans cowering in the corner. The patient helpless on the bed. And Clara, standing in the side doorway, rifle at her shoulder, a ghost in gray scrubs. El Martillo saw her. His eyes, the only part of his face visible between his helmet and mask, widened in shock. He saw the rifle she held. His man's rifle. "It's the nurse," one of the others hissed in disbelief. Evans looked up, his face a mask of terror and confusion. "Reeves? What in God's name are you doing? Put that down! You'll get us all killed!" Clara ignored him. Her focus was entirely on the 3 men in front of her. Her stance was perfect, her breathing controlled. The rifle felt like an extension of her arm. "Leave," she said, her voice low and colder than a morgue slab. "Walk out the way you came, and you live." El Martillo laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "A little nurse wants to play soldier. Kill her." They raised their rifles. They were fast. She was faster. She didn't fire a wild spray. She fired 2 shots. Pop, pop. The sound was deafening. 2 precise, economical rounds. One for the gunman on the left, one for the gunman on the right. Both rounds hit center mass, punching through their vests with the sheer kinetic force, staggering them backward. They weren't kill shots. She was using their own ammunition, which was likely not armor-piercing, but they were disabling. They went down, gasping for air, their ribs likely broken. El Martillo was left. He was good. He didn't hesitate. He dove for cover behind an examination bed, firing a burst as he moved. The bullets ripped through the wall where she had been standing, shredding a Heart Health poster. But she wasn't there anymore. She had moved the instant she fired, dropping low, rolling behind a heavy-duty gurney. The tactical dance had begun. "Who are you?" El Martillo yelled from behind his cover, his voice strained. I'm the person who's not letting you leave this room with him, Clara called back, her voice steady. She was scanning, listening. The gurney was good cover, but not permanent. From the corner, Dr. Evans whimpered. Just give them what they want. He's nobody, a nameless vagrant. Clara's eyes flickered to Evans. She saw his phone. Still clutched in his hand, the screen lit up. She saw the last message he'd sent. They're here. He's in TB2. I'm trapped with him. The text was sent to a number she didn't recognize. It all clicked into place. The timing. Evans's agitation. His attempt to hide in the same room as the target. He wasn't hiding from the gunmen. He was waiting for them. He was the one who had tipped them off. He was a traitor. A new, purer form of anger crystallized inside her. It was sharp and clean. You! She snapped at Evans, her voice cracking like a whip. Get over here. Now. Terrified, he scrambled on his hands and knees toward her. Push this gurney, slowly, toward the door, she commanded. And Martillo fired another burst, the bullets sparking off the metal frame of the gurney. Evans screamed and tried to duck, but Clara grabbed the back of his white coat. Push! Sobbing, he pushed. The gurney rolled forward, a moving wall of steel. Clara crouched behind it, using it as cover, her rifle pointed toward the bed where the gunman was hiding. She needed to end this. The patient was still exposed. The other two gunmen were stirring, groaning in pain. Her eyes scanned the room. She saw the heavy oxygen tank chained to the wall near El Martillo's position. An idea, reckless and dangerous, formed in her mind. She took the sidearm she had acquired, a Glock 19, from the waistband of her scrubs. She leaned around the edge of the gurney and fired twice at the wall just above the tank. The bullets ricocheted, not meant to hit, but to draw his attention. As expected, El Martillo popped up to return fire. In that split second, Clara sighted the main rifle not on him, but on the brass valve at the top of the oxygen tank. She squeezed the trigger. The high-velocity round struck the valve with a deafening crack. The brass shattered. With a violent, explosive hiss, the tank's contents vented, and the massive steel cylinder, freed from its chain, became a rocket. It shot sideways, a green missile of pure kinetic energy. It slammed into the examination bed El Martillo was using for cover. The bed, the mattress, and the gunman were all thrown against the far wall with bone-shattering force. There was a sickening crunch of metal and man. Then, silence. Clara stood up from behind the gurney, the rifle held at a low ready. The room was a wreck. Plaster dust filled the air. Two men were groaning on the floor, clutching their chests. One was a broken heap against the wall. It was over. Dr. Evans stared at the carnage, his mouth agape, his face the color of spoiled milk. He looked from the downed gunman to Clara, who stood calm and composed in the center of the chaos. The quiet, timid nurse was gone. In her place was a woman who radiated a lethal competence that was more terrifying than any weapon. You, he stammered. Clara's eyes were like chips of ice. She walked over to him, plucked the phone from his trembling hand, and glanced at the screen. She saw the sent message, the call log. You did this, she said. It wasn't a question. You called them. Evans's face crumpled. No, they made me. They have things on me, financial issues. They threatened me. You traded this man's life for money, Clara said, her voice flat. She gestured to the patient on the bed, who was staring at her with a look of profound awe and gratitude. And you were willing to let everyone else in this clinic die to cover your tracks. Just then, the distant but unmistakable sound of sirens began to wail. Someone outside must have called the police when the shooting started. A new panic seized Evans. The authorities were coming. He looked at the guns, the bodies, and at Clara. He saw his escape. He was the victim. She was the one with the gun. His expression shifted from terror to a desperate, cunning arrogance. He was Dr. Evans. He was important. She was a nobody. "You're insane," he shouted, his voice regaining its blustering power. "You brought guns into my clinic. You've endangered everyone. When the police get here, I'll tell them everything. You'll be locked away for the rest of your life." He smiled then, that same cruel, thin smile she knew so well. He thought he had her. He thought he was still in control. Clara looked at him, and for the first time since the attack began, she allowed a flicker of emotion to show on her face. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was pity. "You still don't get it, do you?" she said softly. The sirens grew louder, closer, but they were joined by a new sound, a sound that made the hair on Clara's arms stand up, a sound she knew in her bones. The deep, rhythmic thumping of helicopter rotors. Not a police or news chopper. This was the heavy, percussive beat of a military aircraft, a Black Hawk. Evans's smile faltered. He looked confused. The patient on the bed, the construction worker, spoke for the first time. His voice was raspy but steady. "It's over, doctor. You just don't know it yet." Clara walked over to the patient. She ignored Evans completely. She began checking his vitals, her hands once again a nurse's hands, gentle and sure. "Pulses elevated but strong," she said, her voice professional. "No signs of immediate distress. I need to get you to a proper facility." "My name is Commander Alex Thorne," the man said. "Naval Intelligence. I was gathering intel on a cartel's human trafficking route when my cover was blown. They ran me off the road. I knew they'd come looking for me." Clara nodded. "I figured it was something like that." Who are you?" Thorne asked, his eyes searching hers. Before Clara could answer, the front of the clinic was flooded with a new group of men. These were not cartel thugs. They moved with the same efficiency, but with a different kind of authority. They wore black fatigues with no insignia, carrying state-of-the-art equipment. They swept through the building, securing the hostages, detaining the wounded gunmen, and assessing the situation with chilling speed. They were ghosts of a different sort. One of them, a tall man with a severe face, came to the doorway of Trauma Bay 2. He saw the scene, took in Clara and the rifle she had now set aside, and spoke into his wristcom. "Sierra 6, we have the package. He is secure. Hostile elements neutralized by an unknown friendly." The helicopter was now hovering directly over the clinic, the downdraft rattling the windows. Ropes snaked down onto the roof. A minute later, a man stepped into the room who made everyone else, even the tactical operators, seem secondary. He was in his late 50s, with a ramrod-straight posture and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore a simple, undecorated military uniform, but the stars on his collar glittered in the dim light. A general. He radiated an aura of absolute, unquestionable command. His eyes swept the room, taking in every detail in a single glance. He saw the neutralized gunmen, the wrecked room, the cowering Dr. Evans, and Commander Thorne on the bed. Then his eyes landed on Clara. He paused. His gaze was so intense it felt like a physical weight. He looked at her stance, the way she held herself, the calm in her eyes amidst the chaos. He looked at the unconscious gunman laid out in the recovery position. He looked at the precise, disabling shots on the other two. "Report," he said, his voice a low baritone that commanded instant obedience. Commander Thorne started to speak. "General Maddox, sir, we were compromised. They The general held up a hand, silencing him. His eyes remained fixed on Clara. Not you. Her. All eyes in the room turned to Clara. Dr. Evans, seeing his chance, scrambled to his feet. General, thank God you're here. This nurse, she went crazy. She had a gun. She started shooting. I tried to stop her. General Maddox did not even glance at him. It was as if Evans was a piece of furniture. His focus was entirely on Clara. I asked you for a report, nurse, he said, his tone clipped. Clara stood up straight. The deference was gone. The timidity was a forgotten memory. She met the general's gaze, and for the first time, she felt like she was speaking her native language again. 5 hostiles, armed with automatic rifles. Objective was Commander Thorne. I neutralized 2 non-lethally in the west hallway. I engaged the remaining 3 in this room. 2 disabled, 1 incapacitated. All hostiles accounted for. The clinic staff and patients are secure. 13 hostages, all unharmed. She paused, then added, Sir. The general's expression did not change, but a flicker of something, understanding, respect, entered his eyes. He took a step closer. That's a situation report, not an explanation. You handled SIG rifles and engaged multiple armed combatants with textbook efficiency. You are not a nurse. It was a statement of fact. Dr. Evans laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. She's not a nurse. Of course she's a nurse. A barely competent one at that. Look at her file. She's nobody. This time, the general did turn his head. He gave Evans a look of such profound, withering contempt that the doctor physically flinched. Silence, the general said. The single word carried more weight than Evans's entire tirade. Evans's mouth snapped shut. The general turned back to Clara. I will ask you one more time. Who are you? Clara took a breath. The lie was over. The quiet life had been a fiction. It was time to come home. Petty Officer First Class Clara Reeves, she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing with an authority no one in the clinic had ever heard from her. United States Navy, Special Warfare Development Group. Call sign? Banshee. She met his eyes. Retired. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the tactical operators paused. Commander Thorne stared at her, his jaw slack. He knew what DevGru was. Everyone in their world did. The elite of the elite. SEAL Team 6. Dr. Evans looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Navy? SEAL? You? That's impossible. You're a woman. General Maddox's lips curved into the barest hint of a smile. It was a terrifying sight. Doctor, you are a living testament to the fact that a man can be both highly educated and a complete idiot. Petty Officer Reeves was one of the first women to complete the full SEAL qualification pipeline in the Quiet Integration Program. Her specialty was combat medicine and direct action. Her record is classified so far above your pay grade that you'd need a spaceship to read it. He turned back to Clara. Your file says you retired 2 years ago. Personal reasons. I was tired of the politics, sir, Clara said simply. I wanted to do the work, just the work, the healing part. And instead you ended up here, working for him, Maddox said, gesturing dismissively at Evans. He walked over and took the phone from Clara's hand. His eyes scanned the messages. And dealing with his brand of politics. He looked at Evans. Dr. Mark Evans. According to this, you accepted a payment of $200,000 to notify a certain interested party if a man matching Commander Thorne's description was ever admitted to your clinic. You placed the call an hour ago. Evans's face went white. That's not true.
She doctored that phone.
My tech team is already pulling the data from your office computer and the cell tower records, the general said, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. They are also flagging your offshore bank accounts. You traded American lives for a down payment on a new yacht. You are a traitor, and you will be treated as such. He nodded to two of his operators. Take him. The two men moved with silent efficiency, grabbing Evans by the arms. He began to bluster and struggle. You can't do this. I am a respected surgeon. I have rights. I'll call my lawyer. You'll be provided with a military tribunal-appointed counsel, Maddox said coldly. You can tell him all about your rights. Take him away. As they dragged the sputtering, protesting doctor out of the room, he locked eyes with Clara one last time. In his gaze, she saw the final, dawning horror of a man who had picked on the wrong person, who had mistaken a resting tiger for a house cat. The room was quiet again, save for the hum of the helicopter. Maddox's team was preparing a stretcher for Commander Thorne. Maddox stood before Clara. Petty Officer Reeves, he said, his tone formal again. It's just Clara now, sir. No, he said. I don't think it is. He looked around the wrecked room at the testament to her skill and control. You left because you were tired of the bureaucracy. You wanted to do the work, I get that. But the world needs people with your skills, people who can stand in the door when the wolves come knocking. He paused, his gaze thoughtful. I have a special projects division, small, agile, zero red tape. We operate outside the normal chains of command. We find problems and we fix them. The work is direct. It involves a great deal of healing. And sometimes, he added, a glint in his eye, it involves ensuring the people who cause the sickness can't hurt anyone ever again. It wasn't a question. It was an offer. A door back into the world she had tried to leave, but on her own terms. No more politics, just the work. The unit needs a new medical lead, Maddox continued. Someone who can operate independently, someone who understands the nuances of both saving a life and, when necessary, taking one. Someone I can trust. Clara looked at Commander Thorne being carefully loaded onto the stretcher. She looked at the faces of her fellow nurses, peering fearfully but with newfound respect from the hallway. She thought of Maria, who had shown her kindness. She thought of the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly placed IV and the cold satisfaction of a perfectly placed shot. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe you couldn't separate the two. To heal, sometimes you first had to cut out the disease. She met General Maddox's unwavering gaze. The quiet, timid nurse was dead and gone. In her place stood Banshee. What's the uniform? She asked. The general's smile was real this time. Whatever you want it to be, but I'd suggest something a little more durable than scrubs. She nodded. A single, decisive motion. When do I start? A quiet, exhausted relief washed over her, so profound it was almost dizzying. It was the feeling of a bone snapping back into place, the feeling of coming home. She was no longer a ghost, no longer hiding. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. The medic on Maddox's team approached her as the general was coordinating Thorne's evac. Ma'am, he said, his voice full of youthful awe. That takedown in the hall, the choke, the weapon strip, I've never seen anything so fast. Clara looked at the young man, who couldn't have been more than 20. He had the earnest, eager eyes of someone who had only seen this work in training simulations. It's just muscle memory, she said. You do it enough times, you stop thinking about it. But the recovery position, he said, shaking his head in wonder. You put the first guy in the recovery position after you choked him out. In the middle of all this, who does that? The job is to stop the threat, Clara replied, her voice soft but firm. Not to be a monster. Never forget the difference. The young medic nodded, his expression one of deep contemplation. He had just received a lesson more valuable than anything he'd learned in a formal debrief. As the last of the tactical team filed out, leaving local law enforcement to handle the cleanup and the cover story, a gang dispute that spilled into the clinic, Clara walked through her former workplace. The air was now thick with the smell of cordite and plaster dust, a violent overlay on the familiar scent of bleach. Her colleagues stared at her with a mixture of fear and reverence. Maria just stood by the shattered front doors, tears streaming down her face. Clara walked over to her. "Are you all right, Maria?" Maria threw her arms around her, hugging her tightly. "Oh, honey, we had no idea. You saved us. You saved all of us." "I just did what anyone would have done," Clara murmured, uncomfortable with the praise. Maria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "No, child, not anyone. You. Thank you." The vindication was not in Evans's downfall, or even in the general's offer. It was here, in the grateful eyes of the woman who had offered her a kind word when she had felt most alone. It was the realization that she had protected her flock. General Maddox was waiting for her by a black, unmarked SUV that had pulled up to the clinic's entrance. The Black Hawk was already a distant speck in the sky. "My people will handle the transition," he said. "They'll collect your things, deal with the lease on your apartment. A transport will be ready for you in 2 hours. It'll take you to a secure facility for out-processing and your new orientation." Clara nodded, her mind already shifting gears, processing logistics, timelines, mission parameters. "There's one thing, sir," she said. "What is it?" "The clinic. It's underfunded, understaffed. The people here, they deserve better." Maddox studied her for a moment. "I agree. I'll make a call. An anonymous donation from a Grateful Patients Foundation should appear in their accounts. Enough to get new equipment, hire more staff, and maybe even give a certain head receptionist a nice bonus and an early retirement if she wants it." A genuine smile touched Clara's lips. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me, Reeves," he said, opening the passenger door for her. "Welcome back to the fight." As she slid into the seat, she felt the exhaustion of the past few hours settle deep into her bones. But it was a good exhaustion. The exhaustion of a job well done. The quiet life was over, and she had never felt more alive. The vehicle pulled away, leaving the small, dusty border clinic behind, a crucible where a quiet nurse had been burned away, revealing the warrior of tempered steel that had been there all along. Thank you for sticking with us through that intense ride. If you enjoy stories of hidden strength and earned vindication, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support is the fuel that keeps these narratives coming. Now, I have a question for you. Think about Clara's old boss, Dr. Evans. Do you think people like him are created by the power they're given, or are they drawn to power because of who they already are? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stick around, because the next story is queued up and ready to play. It's a gripping tale you won't want to miss.